Okay, let's start this session. Welcome back to our panel now on MPEG-DASH for distribution of broadcast content. We have a good number of people here in the panel to present their views. We have put together a couple of slides. We make basically two rounds among the panelists. And first they will introduce about themselves, the company, what they are working on, and their own position. And we start that from more or less, since it's about broadcasting, from one representative from a well-known broadcaster. Then next comes somebody who is about dealing with distributing the content within the network. And then since we need network devices, there is a big network manufacturer involved. And in the end, we have technology provider that bring things to mobile devices, as we have just heard it, and provide implementations in the DASH environment. And the panelists will introduce themselves, and we will start with Chris, who will speak on behalf of BBC.
Okay, yes, so I'm Chris Paul from BBC R&D. The BBC, of course, is a UK broadcaster, public service broadcaster, with an online product, BBC iPlayer, which handles something in the order of 3 billion requests a year, 9 or 10 million a day, from a whole range of connected devices, including connected TVs, tablets, mobiles, desktop PCs, games consoles, and so on. So me personally, I'm a lead research engineer in R&D. I've been for about 15 years, and I've been working on kind of internet content delivery research and connected television for 6 or 7 years. And of relevance to this session, involved in serialization of profiles of MPEG-DASH, most recently in DVB and HPB-TV. And also undertaken a number of sort of trials and experiments with DASH, from surround audio to Ultra HD coverage of the World Cup, which we're involved in at the moment.
Okay, next we have Nicholas.
Yes, hello, I'm Nicolas Veil. I'm solution architect for Akamai. You may know Akamai as a large cloud platform with hundreds of thousands of servers, so it's not as big as Amazon, but it's one of the biggest CDN that you may encounter. And each day Akamai delivers 15 to 30% of the web traffic. And currently for the World Cup, we are picking around 5 terabit seconds. And our internal game positions France versus Germany at 7, so probably we'll end up at 8. So we are just beating all the records here, and that's interesting because the newest service from Akamai introduced this year is the new live dash ingest capability, and we intend in the future to have this scale at the same level as we are doing today for HLS, smooth streaming, or even HTS with our services. So. Yes, working for 1 year at Akamai, and as Thomas, also a DashIF member working in the promotion group, also a blogger and a streaming media magazine contributor, especially working on the Dash deployment. Maybe you have seen this article. And the focus for me and for Akamai is obviously to deliver Dash at scale, and also work on the interoperability, which is not a small issue regarding Dash implementation.
Okay, thank you. So next we have Kevin.
Okay, so I'm from Cisco. You probably know Cisco very well as a sort of a network kit and solutions provider. The part I come from is the service provider Video Software and Solutions, and I hope I've got that correct, which is a company which is part of the company that's acquired various other companies, including NDS, which is where I came from, Scientific Atlanta, and that's sort of where we come into part of the streaming business, because we provided equipment like from the Scientific Atlanta side, the video encoders, the infrastructure, the software and clients and the end devices, be it set-top box or players on companion devices, as well as security and content protection, and all of the head-end systems that go around managing that and the EPG data and all of that sort of infrastructure to support that. So that's a bit of background of where we're coming and what Cisco does. Myself, I joined, I think, 1997, far too many years ago. And without moving, I've had about 6 or 7 different jobs, which is quite pleasant. A lot of the background is with work in standards, primarily in DVB, but historically also with MPEG, including some work with DASH. And I've sort of an interest in a wide range of different areas, including particularly sort of the connected home and what that means and how you get content to all those sorts of devices, which really now means a requirement for over-the-top streaming for DASH-type solutions that work as far as ubiquitously across all the devices.
And then we have Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Christian. So I talked a bit about Qualcomm in my previous talk because those were here, but basically the focus on our end is really on the end device in the wireless industry. And so we're creating technologies which are basically always innovative, explore areas which are actually challenging, but then take this on. And so it's really basically the mission more to change and to make wireless part of our life, discover like the limitless possibilities. So that's basically the larger vision. In the area of basically a very concrete of Dash distribution of video, I just introduced our Snapdragon 805, which is the latest technology where we have mobile video streaming supporting HEVC, Dash. It's supported by the latest access technologies, including now broadcast, LTE broadcast, in order to deliver high-end content. And if you talk about mobile video, it's not about what was the case like 5 years ago where you had like QVGA resolutions. We are talking about that this is the highest end probably you get even compared on fixed net access. So it's about 4K HEVC support, very high access bitrate. So I'm a technical consultant for Qualcomm working standards. I joined Qualcomm through an acquisition of Digital Fountain and involved in standards in different areas and worked with the corporate R&D team to basically bring these innovations and ideas back and forth. So there's always an exchange between people working in standards and people working in corporate R&D. They have ideas and we have ideas, and they need to kind of map to make it interoperable. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And finally, it's about me. I'm working for Bitmoving, which is a kind of new company, startup company, exists since 2 years. We basically have 2 products. One is a cloud-based transcoding streaming as a service solution focusing on MPEG-DASH that could bring in any type of content, offline, online, live, whatever format, and we basically dash it, make it available for dash-based delivery. Could be integrated in any kind of environment, web environment, set-top box environment, streaming environment, whatever you want. And on the client side, we have this MPEG-DASH, which is an adaptation framework that provides high-quality streaming, focusing on the Dash format. We also support others; those are existing currently. And MPEG-DASH is actually based on an open-source Dash access library that is also the MPEG-DASH reference software that is called LibDash. Further information on the website here. I myself have a research background coming from university and now started the company Bitmoving and working in the domains on streaming, adaptation, and quality of experience. I was also active in MPEG for over 10 years now, mostly MPEG and also now MPEG-DASH, but also a bit in WFAC, IETF, and even now the Dash Industry Forum. Further information here on my blog or follow me on Twitter. So now that we have done the first round of quick introduction, each of the panelists will give a brief position statement, and your task would be to make notes, make questions, which we could address at the end. And we start again from the broadcasting point towards the network and the client, starting with Chris again.
Okay. So for us, I guess the first question is why are we interested in MPEG-DASH in the first place? And really, I mean, our hope is that it can help us kind of stem the proliferation of different media formats that we have to support. Currently we manage quite a few different formats, and hoping to move over time to something standards-based that can be adopted across a whole range of devices would help us enormously. In many ways also, I think Dash is a better technical solution. It's been designed with a range of use cases in mind, and it learns from the experience of media delivery with a number of previous systems. Another really key reason why we're interested is in being able to address the HTML5 browser environment without the need for plugins and the opportunities presented by the media source extensions. And we believe Dash is ideally suited as a media delivery mechanism to support that. Also has relevance particularly on Android devices as well, I think. But it's not without its challenges, and the obvious first one is that if we introduce Dash, then we've immediately introduced another media format, which is exactly what we're hoping in the long term not to have to do. In the BBC, we had to do quite a bit of rationalisation of our production of different formats in order to consider adding more. And there's a talk that will cover a few aspects of that tomorrow morning by one of my colleagues, Henry Webster. But Dash is also a very rich toolkit. So what we really need is stable profiles that everyone can work to. Because otherwise there's a risk that we replace a number of proprietary delivery mechanisms with one kind of name, MPEG-DASH, but in a number of different variants that are incompatible. And so we really need to get behind a core functionality and way of doing things. And there's a lot of work been going on in the industry to help that happen. Related to that, once we put something out there, we really need to support it for some time. So we have to get it right before we do that. Live content is more of a challenge than on demand, and a lot of the Dash deployments so far have done a good job at on demand, but live needs a bit more work. We're particularly interested in broadcast quality and reliability, particularly when we're targeting TV platforms, where viewers have a real expectation that something on TV works like TV. That's a challenge. But on all these areas, I think there has been great progress made, and I think we're in a much better position in 2014 to move forward with MPEG-DASH than we have been previously.
Okay, Nicola.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so what you see is an example of what we can put under Chris' words moving forward with Dash. It's the workflow that Akamai is proposing to its clients for this year, focusing on live. Soon with Cisco encoders pushing to the platform the prepared contents. So this is a pass-through product, but as Chris said, it's one of the strong points of the Dash standard and its deployment is that potentially with one stream, or we could address all the devices on the market, and especially the ones who are currently proposing some kind of I would say variant support for HLS, namely the Android platform, which you can barely categorize as a unified supportive platform for HLS. So the plan, and that's what we are pushing in Europe for France Télévisions in France, is to start in November for our first live Dash stream for HBBTV, HBBTV set, and then to extend to the rest of the devices. So it seems like we have something very good to answer this question of the format fragmentation across the platforms, and also to face this problem of the end of the old plugins API in the browser. So as you have seen, Chrome probably is going to discard the old Netscape API interface. Firefox the same. Firefox is moving through MSE implementation. Safari also provides new hopes on this side. So there is a shift, and this shift in the browser industry is that we don't have any plugins anymore, and so that's a big problem for the premium industry because of the DRM support, which is not fully mature in Dash, even if we have made good progress with common encryption. But yes, this is a shift that we are seeing now, and the hope here is that we will be able to reduce the complexity of the content preparation workflows. So that may not be an absolute truth because precisely of this new DRM problem that may arise, which is one ecosystem equal one DRM, instead of having maybe two DRMs for all the ecosystem. So we'll see how things are going in terms of interoperability there. But the hope is to have simpler workflows which are causing less troubles to the broadcasters and all the content providers. Yes. As Christian was mentioning in the previous session, there is a very important factor with Dash is that you can design, you can make a better heuristic if you want, and this is what is happening currently in the industry. People are exchanging their views on the algorithms and proposing to implement what has been implemented into a previous project. All is open source, and that's the beauty of it, is that we collectively are building something new, something better. I'm not saying that smooth streaming was bad. I mean, actually, it's the basis of Dash, so it was very good. But we are not in the scheme where the industry is dependent from one vendor or one provider. So that's a very important fact, and I'm pretty sure that we will see more and more positive figure of the Dash impact on the quality of experience. Maybe you have seen in the streaming mediaist Baptiste Coudelier from Hulu. He was stating that since they implemented Dash, they had at least 20% of improvement of the QoE for their users. So the heuristic is really a very positive factor here. And finally, and this is one of the demand of our clients, especially in France, but the same in all Europe. Broadcasters, they want subtitles. And they want multi-audio, and honestly, this is a pain to implement using RTMP and all the old standards. So the hope here is that Dash is going to bring us some new capabilities to make this easy and transparent and painless. Yeah, that's the hope. So far, this is a work in progress, at least regarding the subtitles, because as you may know, there are some initiatives at EBU regarding the standardization of a new EBU TTD standard, which is already accepted by HBBTV in the 2.0 standard, but still efforts to do for the, I would say, for the OTT counterpart, but still great hope for the broadcasters and also for us to simplify the workflow and finish with the having like hundreds of subtitling formats. So yeah, many hopes in Dash, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So what is Kevin saying about this?
Okay, so let's try and be quick so you can ask everybody else hard questions. The first point really is similar to the previous one, Dash or HLS. Dash is, to me, it's the young Turk. Although it's been around for more years than Thomas cares to remember, it is something that's new. It's not something that's ubiquitous out there. But everybody seems to be slowly centralizing on it, apart from HLS. So we're down to two real formats, or over the next couple of years, we'll hopefully be down to two formats, rather than Dash or HLS or Smooth. So that's the first point. The next 2 points I put up are things that it's not necessarily Dash can't do, but I think that can be done better, or that more work needs to be done. And if people disagree and say it's done perfectly, I'd be very grateful to hear their comments. Live, we increasingly want to see live support. I'll let Thomas, if he feels like it, tell the tale about how slow live can be on OTT, but I'm sure some of you have your own ones as well. And the other thing is advertising. A lot of people are funded by advertising, and the ability to have targeted advertising to substitute your own ads can make a massive difference to the profitability of any individual operator. So advertising is another important one, and both of those, as I say, are active areas of work and agreement. And on the interoperability area, we do need to get agreement so that it's easy to do those sorts of things and so that all the parts of the systems will actually plug together. Yes, it'd be nice if you bought everything from Cisco. Despite the best attempts of some of our salesmen, my understanding is that people do buy bits from other places or have to integrate with Akamai or something. So understanding how all that sits together is key. The maturity is the other thing that's been hinted at. Dash is getting a lot better, but there's a maturity that some things have that I think Dash needs to build up to, and I think Chris was hinting at that. It's how easy is it to deploy? How stable is it? How common is it to get exactly the right behavior across all the devices? You want to put one piece of content out at a set of rates and it to work on every single device. So that's the maturity, the ubiquity, the integration operations. I put the Dash IF there because that, together with some of the operating points of DVB's been specifying, are really key to that. And both of those are really worldwide operations. It's not just European in the case of DVB. The other final point is where you've got continual updates, and this is something where perhaps I should have put Kevin's position statement rather than Cisco's, is that there is a need to introduce new functionality, live, advertising, but if you've got that continual improvement, people can wait and say, well, let's carry on with HLS rather than, or with Smooth, or with whatever, rather than making the jump because there's new content coming in. So we have to, I think, be careful about what we introduce, and that's where I think things like Dash IF and DVB have a very good gatekeeper functionality that MPEG does a lot of excellent work, picks up some really great stuff, and then the relevant parts of it can be managed in a much more controlled fashion and with much better interoperability. Of those new areas, I think more network infrastructure, which probably relates to the CDN issues, which is how can the network in all its facets work well with this system and how much can be added to by things, whether it's the quality of experience metadata networks can make use of that information flying by. And sort of tying all of those up together is the idea of keep it simple. I would have a nervousness about any standard, and this was being watching standards too long and being guilty of it myself, is that too much gets added and it gets too complicated. We do need to keep it simple because that makes it much easier to deploy, much easier to interoperate, much easier to test, and all of that gives the end user a much better experience and hopefully a much lower cost for the ultimate bill payer, which is the content owner or the operator or the broadcaster. So those are my points, thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. So what does Thomas say?
Yes, I mean, I talked a lot of the things before already, but basically, what we're basically looking for is establish the benefits of an HTTP-based adaptive streaming in fixed and wireless access network, and that should be ubiquitous. What is actually necessary, and that it's understood that this is not just the best effort, so people will really want to bring in high-end services on top of over-the-top networks. So Netflix is building the whole service OTT, so others, they want to basically, it's not like you say that's just the best effort, it needs to bring all the quality. So we need to bring it on par with other distribution networks, what is available with satellite, with terrestrial distribution, with what is done in managed IPTV. And there are huge steps into this, especially for on-demand. So I do think on-demand nowadays is mostly OTT. For live, it's a bit harder. The opportunities really come, and that's what we see from the mobile space. It's very simple to kind of deploy and integrate new technologies and codecs. So when you see like HDVC, the first deployments, they are over-the-top streaming. If you look into 4K, it's over the top. It's nothing where you basically have to go through a huge amount of infrastructure support. It's much simpler to experiment and test with new technology. So that's where a bit kind of, you need to enable the new things, to integrate new technologies, new formats, and so on and so on. So there's always new work coming up. So I understand that there's a stability issue, but at the same time, I think there's the opportunity of experiment with new technologies there. So, and I think that's where it comes in. So you have the abilities for this new experience. What we also see is that you get much easier kind of this seamlessly enable live on-demand catch-up services. So you basically generate and encode content once and you make it available as catch-up. So all of this is naturally given. And on the delivery aspects, what we're seeing is that actually in the other way, to say it's not about only that we say we want to bring broadcasters content for OTT, it's also that Dash content is brought onto broadcast networks. So there's efforts in this direction. One is in LTE for the LTE broadcast, and so by just distributing and broadcasting content through LTE, there is not necessarily a benefit. So that's just the first step to establish the formats also as broadcast formats. The real benefits come then that you can deploy services hybrid. So you basically have combinations of unicast and broadcast, where you enable seamless migration. You can do on-demand handoff. So there's work in 3GP where we basically enable that you, if there's high demand for a specific service in the network, you can seamlessly switch it over to LTE broadcast. Once the demand is gone, you switch it back. So you have the ability to basically support broadcast with unicast by adding additional experiences. So that's, I think, where the opportunities come in terms of establishing these formats also as broadcast formats, because the combination with unicast is much simpler. And that's basically where I see the opportunities. And I share all the opinions before, but I wanted to have something complementary here. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And finally, from a small startup company, our position is, okay, deployments, trials, experiments. That's something we're interested in. And of course, a lot of people come to us, approach us, and they want to have easy transition from existing infrastructure, from their existing formats for which they have set up everything, and they are looking forward to have transition towards Dash. One option that could help here is something that is HTML5 media source extensions and encrypted media extensions. Netflix calls that premium video extensions, and that's available on Chrome Internet Explorer. As of now, we all know that in Firefox this is going to be implemented, and probably you heard about this announcement from Netflix that these premium video extensions will be supported by Safari, so that might be a good indicator that Apple is slowly moving towards those formats, or at least provide basic support for Dash formats, segment formats in particular, within their tools. And then something, as Thomas mentioned, mobile environments is becoming more and more important as people are accessing video increasingly with their smartphones, tablets, and so on. And there are a lot of streaming improvements. Thomas had mentioned some of them. Also in his last presentation, he had mentioned some of them, but there are a few more, both at the application and the transport layer. And finding those streaming improvements for the given context is I think, key to a successful deployment of Dash. And then finally, of course, what is the QE beyond startup delay and smooth playback? So what can you do better here? And is it really worth to do it better? I mean, that's also a question we have to ask ourselves. And then the integration with other new services that should enable new kind of experience. And then again, okay, what's the QE impact of this new services that has been mentioned by fellow panelists here. Okay, so that's, I think, brings a very good overview about what people at the panel here think about what MPEG-DASH should do. We have even broadcasters' opinion on that, but now it's up to you if you have any questions. And I see hands are rising up, so please.
So I think it's a really good panel. I'm glad you're all here. So the question I've got is that, I'm Ben Foreman from BSkyB. As broadcasters, what can we do to ensure that the Dash standard is implemented as a real standard? Because it already, even before it's being implemented, we're talking to different people and they're saying they're implementing it in a different way, even though everybody's saying it's the standard. And I think, I wrote down the question as you were talking, but it was crystallised by straight afterwards, because Chris, you said we need to work on stable profiles, and Nicholas said it's great because you can have different heuristics. And so straight away, even between the two of you, there are things that are going to cause complexity. So as ecosystem stakeholders and people responsible for delivering content, how can we make sure, and what pressure do we need to put onto which people to make sure that we get a real standard?
Right. So I think there are two aspects to that, aren't there? Because there's what we put out there as broadcasters, and the content formats and so on should be interoperable across a whole range of devices. That doesn't necessarily mean that every single client device has to behave in exactly the same way. There could be some client devices that are tailored towards sort of working well on mobile networks and having heuristics that work well on mobile networks. There could be different strategies on connected televisions where you've got sort of larger screens and perhaps you want a different kind of approach to balancing quality versus delay and so on. So there could be a number of different sort of good client implementations with different aspects. What we do absolutely need is a core interoperable kind of format for what we actually put out there. Even there, we can have extensions, we can have additional information that certain clients are able to use and others not. But we do need that core. And I think it has taken a few years for the content providers and the TV manufacturers and network operators and everyone to kind of to home in on what that core should look like. And I think we do now in the sort of the work from -IF and the DVB standards and so on have what should be an interoperable core that can support a rich ecosystem of clients and content creation tools.
I guess maybe I don't think Thomas probably wants to add something
Yes,
because it's about interoperability and
yes, I mean, I can tell you a bit of my pain from the other end that we kind of try to kind of harmonize and do this. It's we need more people being dedicated involved. That's the first thing. If you go to MPEG, great for developing new technologies. It's very hard to kind of keep the pace there and let people say slow down. We need to kind of make sure that we have an interoperable base. So it's very hard. So on the -IF, for example, we basically creating test vectors, we're creating all these tools. We always have a lack of resources. It's just like we need more people being kind of saying, we need this. Just saying we support it would already be helpful, right? Because that would help us also, and also give us the relevant basic test and use cases you want to do. We kind of make sure that we make all of this stuff interoperable. That is Casey. We need just people speaking up and coming to the organizations and say, we want this and we need this stability and we support you in moving this forward. So we give you the test cases, we give you test content and so on and so on. So more involvement would be great. There's one other issue which we observe. We didn't start from scratch with Dash, right? So what we basically had, we were looking into experiences which came out of smooth streaming, which came out of HDS, which came out of HLS, and all of those were proprietary systems, and we basically got influenced by all of those. And people didn't start from scratch from a blank page in the implementation. They started basically from what they had before. So and they are slightly different, and these differences are now observed also in Dash. So we need to kind of work even harder to make sure that these people move into exactly the same formats. All of this is happening, but there's legacy there, which basically legacy also in the mind of the people which have implemented smooth streaming and HDH and HLS, and basically they are different. But it's not that they're moving immediately into doing it exactly as done in the Dash standard. So that's another problem we're seeing, but it's getting better and better. It's just like a matter of time that people adjust to this.
and maybe Nicola wants to comment on the interoperability aspects of the of the heuristics.
I did not mention that the Akamai service requires the encoder or the packager to push -264 compliant content. Actually, the service is a pass-through service, so you can pass through everything, and actually it's also compatible with HDS, but it's not the topic today. But we could pass pretty much everything through this service, but we decided to restrict it to -264 because for us it's important that the ecosystem grows around a consistent standard or interoperability point that everybody is sharing, because Dash is too wide at its origin to be something that can federate the industry very efficiently. So this is why this is mostly a political action, I would say, like saying, okay guys, we need something and we consider that -264 has got the required characteristics to answer the broadcaster needs, and this is why we support it. And the fact of having different heuristic is exactly as Chris explained, is that you can play the same content in various manners depending on what are your priorities in terms of user experience.
So that won't impact the key.
Maybe just to add one more thing. There's also obviously, as soon as you go into like deployments, BBC deploys it, DBU deploys it. So you have specific regulatory issues. You have metadata requirements, which basically they just need to be considered in this context as well. All of this adds obviously also issues which needs to be taken on. I'm not sure if this had been solved before. These are by people using the formats for the broad services and basically having requirements on enabling this. There are just challenges which come up all of this. We had, for example, significant problems of moving in time text subtitling. Luckily, the EBU took it up and basically was working to this. But it was for a long time that it was not clear how we get into something interoperable. It was just not existing before. So this takes time, but people doing the right actions to move this forward, right? And the expectation to have a full system now it was just not possible in this short amount of time, but I think we're moving in the right direction. So please join, come, bring up your requirements and support the efforts. So I think that's what I would recommend.
Do we have further questions? Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm Jan Theater. I'm from DB Tech. We make a media server, so this is relevant to our interests. You mentioned that there are already implementations and that yet at the same time the current profiles need to be harmonized more. Aren't these two kind of mutually exclusive?
No, they're not. Because I do think that the matureness in the profiles comes, for example, in life, for example, we see that you need to do more work for high scalability, for failover cases, for swaps. And so there are cases which had not been considered in the initial design. What happens if you have warm and hot swaps at the serving, if you need to switch over, if you have service interruptions? All of these things come from deployment experience. We're working on fixing the holes there, making sure that you have a continuous service even if you have issues on the back end. We heard issues that in LTE broadcast, for example, the signaling feed fails, so you don't have a signal to end code, so you're out of signal for 5 seconds. So that has not been taken into account in an interoperable environment. So all these details are gradually fixed. It doesn't mean that the standard is not working as it is. It's just like these cases which come up when people start deploying, these gaps are kind of continuously filled. So, and that's where the additional interoperability comes into play.
A couple of other things. I gave the example of both live and advertising as sort of features that fit within the sets we've got. But the way people do live differs, and how, if you like, live, the live content is, how different players play live content tends to vary. An agreement on that will radically affect what the expectations of the player are, but also of the infrastructure to support it and how quickly data has to be moved through. Similarly for advertising, do you support certain features in the case of the Dash MDP, whether or not you've got X-links is one thing certain people are talking about, and there are other things. How do you manage that, and what's that used for, and how's the syncing structure so that you can do all of those features correctly? So within the framework, you have choices that you can make, and different people will make different choices. And if you don't have consistency of choices, certain functions become very difficult to implement, and therefore you get interoperability problems when you try and bring the systems together to provide the overall solution that people expect. And I also would imagine in the future that you mentioned the subtitles. If you look at broadcast has a lot of richness around it beyond just the audio and video. And there's so many different ways this could be built on, either as additional streams or as part of the streams. Again, as we start experimenting that, making sure that the right things are provided from minimal hooks, so you don't actually change Dash, but you can still provide the full sort of experience of the infrastructure that people have come to expect from television.
Oh, yes, please.
Can we just kind of eloquently explain the same problem again, which is that there are, even with advertising, there are multiple ways to do it. I mean, it's fantastic that we're trying to move towards a standard, but the great thing about HLS and about smooth streaming is that they tell you how to do it and they tell you what they support, and you can then go to a device vendor and say, do you support this? And if they say yes, they generally do, with a few implementation problems as always. with Dash, we'll say, do you support this? And they'll say yes. And do you do advertising? Yes, but we do ad insertion like this, not like that. And again, as content providers, we want to be as efficient as possible, not doing 5 different versions. The idea, as we said, is to bring down the number of versions.
Yes. And I'm of the personal opinion that Dash will give a much richer and better solution for advertising and live, however you want to measure it, than is currently achievable with HLS, because the agreements will result of the dialogues with the likes of the operators, the likes of the network infrastructure, the likes of the CDN, so we actually understand a lot of it in a way that I think will produce something far better. So yes, it's a challenge. Yes, it needs to be sorted. But yes, I think things are happening to significantly improve that.
Yeah, but
So
also,
maybe just also to understand the choices and issues for ad insertion, we're very far in having agreed like on a framework, but obviously there are multiple ad insertion technologies. There is Adobe technologies, there is something which comes out of Cable Labs, and so on and so on. All these people basically come and say, please support our technologies in Dash. So there's no way you say we create one standard and that's it. So we just put Adobe ad insertion. That wouldn't work. So that's what standards are about. You have to basically work with multiple vendors. They have legacy technologies and they come, they propose, they basically show you how to integrate this. So Dash doesn't give you the solution for kind of picking one ad, because these are existing ecosystems, right? The same with DRM. DRM has tried to be a standardized solution. So there are different ecosystems, and I think we should.
That's not technically true though, because common encryption gives you it defines how to do the encryption. It doesn't define how to do other stuff, but it does define how to do encryption.
That's absolutely true, but I mean that still doesn't solve that there's DRM interoperability issues. The encryption just gives you the ability to scalably deliver the same content, but on key management, on integration into the platform, there's still an interoperability issues. And as said, so I think it's important that those people who have these requirements don't expect that the standard fulfills all of this. Please come to the organizations and speak up, provide this through means and channels, because that's important. That helps us also to do the right decisions and to move things forward. If you're driven by companies which basically bring technologies, it's obviously always the attempt first to make sure that these existing ecosystems are enabled, because they all have legacy and also justification. So come there, please, show up.
yeah,
That's really important.
maybe we can add here that, for example, in the Dash Industry Forum, they produce these interoperability guidelines and interoperability points, and they always come up with a pre-final version for community review. So that's even a good opportunity for people who are not involved in the Dash Industry Forum or are not members to provide feedback to what is defined there. So they're kind of very open, and if your company is interested to join, I mean, it's always possible to do so. Okay, so we are very close at the end, and I don't want to keep you away from the coffee break. And now I hope really coffee and I think even tea is there. I would like to thank you for attending the panel. I would like to thank the people here on the panel for providing their positions. And yeah, let us know if this is a good idea, if we should continue having this kind of panel here at Streaming Forum, and what else you want to see. I'm pretty sure there is a next edition of Streaming Forum coming up next year. So if you have any feedback on this panel, we're doing it the second. Thomas and myself are doing this the second time, always trying to bring up new people here with new opinions for you. If you have some feedback on that, just tell it to me. Also, the panelists are here for discussions for you. And thank you for coming, and enjoy the break.
Thank you.